Aloha, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. So thank you for those of you who decided to join us this evening, taking time from your busy lives to provide us with feedback. So welcome to the DHHL Kapolei Beneficiary Consultation meeting on its proposed gaming legislation. Just to let you folks know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to the DHHL website after its conclusion. Before we begin, my name is Andrew Choi. I'm the Acting Planning Program Manager with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And I would just like to call on Homeilani Scheidel to give us an opening pule before we begin the meeting.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Aloha ahi ahi, e pulikako, e komako makua I loko kalaini. We humbly ask you to be with all of us this evening, for this gathering is of great importance to our people. Be our guide as we look at the past, see what is present, to envision the future of our people. Mindful of our kuleana to those who are still waiting for their home. Help us to put aside our differences so that our voices and thoughts may be shared and received without criticism or judgment. While we go through this process, help us to ho'olohe, to listen, ho'opa'a, to learn, ahonui, to be patient, and ho'ihi, to respect each other. Mahalo for our people, our beneficiaries, homestead leaders, DHHL staff, and Hawaiian Home Commissioners in their endeavor to address and find solutions to economic, financial, and political challenges to our trust. Give us all strength, foresight, and courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know what is in the best interest for our beneficiaries now and for the next 7 generations. Mahalo no ko mau. Ho'omaikai, ho'omaluhia, ame aloha. Makua ame ke keiki, ame ka uhani. Hemolele, amen.
Mahalo, Auntie Home, for that wonderful pule. Um, Very good words. Um, Before we begin, I'd also like to introduce the DHHL staff that are um, helping with this meeting. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Chairman William Ayla, who will be joining us, and our Deputy Director, Tyler Gomes. From our Information Community Relations Office, we have Cedric Dort and Jamelia Epping, who are the technical gurus this evening. Also with us tonight is Lehua Kinio Kano, our legislative analyst. From the planning office, who will be taking copious notes, we have Perlene Fukuba and Malia Cox. So in addition to recording the meeting, we'll also be taking very good notes about what is being said this evening. Okay. Cedric, if you can put the PowerPoint back up and advance to the next slide. Okay, so for those of you who are new to Microsoft Teams and virtual meetings in general, this is kind of just a quick um, overview of the controls that are in Microsoft Teams. Um, the two main ways that you can let us know and voice your mana'o is the chat box. So the chat box is the um, icon that looks like a balloon. So if you click on that, it will open up a screen that will allow you to type in your mana'o. So you can type in a question or comment at any time during this meeting. We will get to the comments in the chat box first. Also, a second alternative way to voice your mana'o is by raising your virtual hand. So that's the hand icon. So tonight I will be the facilitator, and I will be calling on people who will be raising your hand. So if you prefer to talk orally, communicate orally, use the raised hand tool, and I will try my best to call on you in the order of when you raised your hand. The other feature I wanted to point out is the audio button. So that is the one that looks like a microphone. So as a courtesy to everyone else in the meeting, if you're not talking, if you could just please mute yourself, so that will eliminate a lot of the background noise, dogs barking, um, police sirens, or cars in the background, or your spouse is washing dishes or something like that. So yeah, please press the mute button when you are not talking. And I'd just like to mention that depending on what type of device you are using, the controls might look a little bit differently, but if you look for those icons, it should work the same. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the chat box, you can type in it at any time. We'll be monitoring it, and we will be taking that mana'o first so that we don't lose track of it. Normally, in a normal beneficiary consultation meeting, we would have a sign-in sheet at the front of the place, the meeting place, for everyone to sign in so that we can get an accurate log of who participated and how many people came to the meeting and whether or not those participating are a DHHL beneficiary. So right now, I'd like to ask you folks to take the time to click on the chat box. Please sign in. Please provide us your name, whether you're a lessee or applicant or other, and what community you call home. Also, if you have more than one person participating on a device, please sign in all the people that are participating so that we can have an accurate log of how many people participated in our meeting tonight. Next slide. While this is a virtual meeting, like all of our beneficiary consultation meetings, whether it be virtual or in person, we do have kuleana to each other in this meeting. So I just wanted to point out that if you can please be respectful of the person talking, please do not interrupt the person that is talking. And like I said before, I'll be the facilitator tonight, so I will try my best to make sure that I call on you if you want to provide input verbally. If you want to provide it in the chat box, that's also another option. When addressing other participants, please show aloha and please treat others respectfully. Treat them how you would like to be treated. Let's agree to disagree, accept that others may have different perspectives and opinions. And lastly, and this is for everyone participating in the meeting, please have an open mind. Take home new ideas or new information that goes both for beneficiaries and for department staff. Next slide. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, we have three main purposes. One, the department would like to provide more information related to the proposed gaming bill, the legislative process, and talk about, in broad strokes, next steps and milestones. We'd also like to answer your questions. We know that a lot of attention and information has been put out there. And so we know that you folks will have a lot of questions. And hopefully some of the information that we provide will answer some of those, but we understand that you might still have questions, and you might even have more questions about the information you see tonight. So we'll try our best to answer your questions. And lastly, we want to get your feedback on several questions, particularly on shaping the process going forward. So as you know, good process usually equates to good results. So we want to get your feedback on process going forward. Next slide. So this is a quick overview of the agenda tonight. Just real briefly to summarize. So the first part of the meeting, the department will be providing a presentation. Then it'll be your turn to ask questions on the presentation. Again, should you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to use the chat box to write them down and we will get to them. After the Q&A session, which give or take half an hour, we would like to have a facilitated discussion with you and get your feedback again on process. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with next steps. Okay, without further ado, and while we transition to the presentation, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Director of Hawaiian Homelands, Tyler Yokepa Gomes. And while Cedric is transitioning to your presentation, maybe you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Aloha mai kako. My name is Tyler Yokepa Gomes. I'm the Deputy Director for the department. Super appreciative for everyone joining us this evening. This is let's say, a conversation that should be very exciting, and I hope to offer as many answers as I can for any of the questions. And without further ado, I'm going to get that screen up and we will kick the presentation off. I can't see the screen anymore. Can someone just give me a verbal confirmation that the presentation is up?
It's on.
Okay. So one of the first questions and concerns we've heard since the commission meeting was, where was the beneficiary consultation? So just a reminder for the beneficiary consultation policy, these are the 4 areas that call for it. Generally, for statewide policy issues, that includes like our water policy or administrative rules. And typically, we don't normally go out for beneficiary consultation before legislative proposals are taken to the commission. The commission generally approves it and it goes out into the process. That said, we've heard loud and clear that there is a severe demand for beneficiary consultation on this topic. This is just one of those policy issues. So the commission heard it, the department heard it, and that's why we're here today. So the impetus or the purpose for this bill comes out of the fact that we're entering the next 100 years of the existence of our department. As I'm sure everyone is aware, this July will mark 100 years since Prince Kuhio achieved the impossible, and as a Native Hawaiian who wasn't even a voting member of Congress, passed this enormous bill through. We have to take a step back and look at what we've achieved in the last 100 years. And there are successes, but I think there is a lot left to be done. And when we consider the fact that there are still 28,000 and growing individuals waiting for homesteads, and those homesteads cost money, this bill really rose out of the desire to find a way to make the money ourselves. If it's not going to be given to us, then the department was tasked with the responsibility of thinking of a way to do it. So that's where this comes from. So just as a reminder, these are the total number of residential applications on each island. This doesn't include pastoral or agricultural. Oahu makes up the vast majority of people waiting for homesteads. The bold numbers that are now appearing, that's the available acreage just for residential land on each of these islands. And what this slide is meant to show is the fact that we don't have enough land, even if we wanted to give out 28,000 new leases today. We just don't have the land to do it. What people don't realize is, even though our corpus is 203,000 acres large, there are many, many acres that are conservation, like on the Big Island, for example, or are the cliff sides, like in Waimanalo, or in Haiku Valley, where the land needs to be environmentally remediated. And so when you start cutting out all of the land that we can't develop, that we can't put homes on, the reality of what are we going to do for these people who are waiting without the land to satisfy them becomes very real. The second problem we're facing is a time problem. The current estimate is that if we were to continue developing homes at the rate that we've been doing it, it's going to take us 182 years to clear the wait list, and that's assuming that nobody else joins. We know that people will continue to join, so this number is destined to increase. More than half of our waitlisters are over the age of 60. When we hear, just give us the land, there are many, many beneficiaries who do not have the time, the family, the ohana, or the ability to put in infrastructure on their own. They need more than just the land, and they don't have the time to do it. And then lastly, we know that there are more than 2,000 Native Hawaiians who have passed away while on the waiting list. And the feeling is if we can do anything to stop another 2,000 from dying, we have a kuleana to try it. And so this weighs heavily on the department's decision to pursue a very aggressive revenue generation model. And then lastly is the matter of the availability of money. This is what the commission approved as our budget request for next year, fiscal 22, $145.9 million. That's a bit lower than years past, but that's keeping in mind everything that COVID has impacted us with. I want to compare that to what we actually received in fiscal 21 when COVID wasn't an issue. Even in these COVID times, we're looking at $120 million difference of what's available versus what we need. And there's been a lot of discussion about if the department can encumber the money. Over the last few years, the department has encumbered just about every single dollar that's been put towards it, with the exception of a few projects that had to be renewed simply because of the length of the project, not because of unnecessary delay. Moreover, our planning department knows that if we had $145.9 million, we could plan out in much longer windows than the current 5-year windows we project. Now, you folks all live in Kapolei, so this is a really prime example, but it costs the department out of pocket $150,000 on average for the infrastructure. So the streets, the sewers, the electric, the water for all of your homes. Each home costs $150,000. Not every homestead is going to be that easy. There are homesteads with rock that is incredibly difficult to bore through. There are homesteads that are in elevations that make it more difficult to get equipment and infrastructure to. There are homesteads that will be further away from water sources. So that $150,000 is the lowest estimate we have based on all of our experience developing homes. If we were going to build infrastructure at $150,000 per home for the remaining 28,000 waitlisters, we would need approximately $4.5 billion on the low end. And that's just not a reality based on what the state can afford to give us right now. The state has a constitutional responsibility to fund this department. It was a promise that was made by the federal government to the Lahui Hawaii with Prince Kuhio. It is a promise that the state of Hawaii undertook when it became a state. And in 1978, our people fought to change the Constitution from the legislature may sufficiently fund the department to the legislature shall sufficiently fund the department. And even then, year after year, the asks that we make can't be met. And that's a function of the fact that the state doesn't have the money to do it. So if the state doesn't have the money, the department came up with a solution we believe can help us meet the demand and fill that gap so that we can build the remaining 28,000 homes. So for comparison, because we're talking about casinos, the data that's most readily available about revenue is from tribal gaming, and that's because of their federal reporting requirements. We are not proposing building off of the Indian casino model. This is just simply to understand the economics of what Indian gaming has done. So currently in the United States, there are 29 states that allow for tribal gaming. Of those 29, they make up a total of 501 different facilities who are generating about $33 billion in revenue every single year. In addition, these 29 states, if we look at the top 16 of those states, the size of the circles represent the amount of money that they're generating. But what this slide shows is that states like Connecticut in the bottom left-hand corner and North Carolina on the upper right, they only have 2 facilities in their states, and yet they're in the top 16 in the country for revenue generation. Not just that, if you look at the chart in general, the number of jobs that are possible is astounding. And these aren't just typical service industry jobs. These are not just cocktail servers and dealers. These are IT individuals because the computers that are necessary to run casinos are so complex. These are new jobs in compliance and enforcement that don't currently exist in our hotels here now. These are jobs at management and executive levels that haven't existed here. And when we consider all of our Native Hawaiians who have left the state, many of whom have gone to states with gaming and found careers there, the opportunity to provide new jobs, jobs that have never existed here before, not just for your Mo'opuna who are still here and are contemplating whether or not they can afford to stay, but making it possible for those who have left to come back and find jobs in a new industry. This is something the state has not contemplated in decades. There is no new revenue generating engine that has the opportunity to create new jobs the way that this does. Lastly, when we look at the tax revenue, and this is how we expect to make money off of the proposed casino. These states are making anywhere from $156 million to up to $3 billion in revenue on average, with our state currently facing a $1.8 billion deficit every year for the next 4 years. Our situation is not going to get better. Not in a year, not in 2, not in 4. And I think we need to think very seriously about new tax revenue generation models. If we continue to increase the existing taxes, that's regressive and it hurts the citizen. But if we can create a new revenue engine and tax that, it creates potential for us to serve our goals, fulfill the mission of Prince Kuhio. And so what this bill does is it creates a gaming commission. So the governor would have the opportunity to appoint the Hawaii Gaming Commission. It'd be 5 members, with a minimum of 1 member being a Native Hawaiian as defined in the Act. There's nothing stopping the governor from appointing 5 Native Hawaiians. It would be with the advice and consent of the Senate. And we're looking for very specific levels of expertise. And the reason is you want a regulatory body or a gaming commission that knows the insides and outs, so that when they create the regulations and the administrative rules that will eventually govern this casino, it's airtight. It helps us prevent from the incursions from those who want to do things that lack the integrity that we need. The Hawaii Gaming Commission would have the ability to appoint an executive director, and that entire administrative agency would be attached under DHHL. And their powers would be the issuance of the gaming license, collection of all taxes, accounting, and adoption of regulations. Again, this is where those jobs come in. These are areas that currently do not exist for careers in Hawaii. And then secondly, they would have enforcement powers to investigate violations, impose fines, records inspections, and ejections of individuals. Now, this bill really is a proposal for limited gaming, and it does 5 things. Now, many of you will recall or heard in the news that the Hawaiian Homes Commission passed or approved the earlier proposal, which was for a 20-year license for a single integrated resort facility on Hawaiian homelands deemed commercial in Kapolei. At that meeting, there were suggestions made from commissioners who supported it, and those were incorporated into a new draft. However, we realized after the fact that the motion that had been made at the time did not allow for the department to amend the bill. So I'm going to be very clear that the commission supports a 20-year license in Kapolei. That was the bill that was passed. However, we know from discussions that are happening at the legislature that this is more likely what is to be introduced. And that's because our legislators can amend the bills however they want before they introduce it, with or without the commission's permission. So we expect the legislature to introduce something along the lines of 1 40-year license for 1 integrated resort on DHHL land designated for commercial use on the island of Oahu, which is a key difference, excluding lands west of Ko'olina. And the reason being was there was a suggestion that if the department could acquire or purchase other lands outside of Kapolei that were more suitable, we didn't want to exclude it. That was the original suggestion. But again, the commission did not give us the leeway to amend the bill for that purpose. The legislature, however, is open to that idea, and it sounds like they will probably propose that. Now, how did Kapolei come up in the first place? Right now, only 95 acres on Oahu are set aside for commercial use, and that is a result of extensive beneficiary consultation that was done as a part of the island and regional plans. When we look at our 95 acres, 80 of them were in Kapolei, which is how we started there. There are 3 acres that are in Kapalama, 2 acres in Mo'iliili, and there are 10 acres in Nanakuli, but those 10 acres are right up against an existing homestead. We have no interest in dropping a casino next door to a homestead, which is why The proposal that the legislature may pass forward excludes lands west of Ko'olina. Now, the license application that the Gaming Commission will consider will require a number of things: history or a plan for community involvement in Hawaii, verified sources of capital to make sure that the proper funding is behind the project, a clean criminal history to maintain integrity, and a development plan that provides maximum revenue to DHHL. In addition, the successful applicant will need to put forward a community benefits plan, one with a training plan for Native Hawaiians to ensure that they are the most qualified for the jobs at the integrated resort, an economic benefit plan to the community, and a plan for community involvement. We proposed, I saw a question, how far west of Ko'olina? All commercial lands that are west of Ko'olina are in Nanakuli, so it excludes all of Nanakuli. No wagering on Hawaii collegiate athletics, and that's to make sure that our college athletes also maintain their integrity. And then lastly, a plan for creating partnerships with the University of Hawaii and our existing educational institutions to make sure that there is a training pathway to get our Native Hawaiians into these jobs starting at the college level. Now, the bill does not select a specific parcel of land ahead of time. It does not task the department with developing the casino or operating it. And I think we all know that the department does not have the time and resources to do those things on its own, which is why the department generally uses development agreements to achieve these same things with other developments. And so like those others, a development agreement would likely have to be negotiated. But as you all know, that before a development agreement is signed, it also goes out for beneficiary consultation. So there is another opportunity for community input prior to the development agreement being put in place. The development agreement at the minimum will require that the applicant invest a minimum of $200 million for design and construction. And that's to ensure that serious investors only apply. The department will initially contribute $5 million to fund the initial operations of the commission. However, that money will come right back to the department. Whoever gets the license, the gaming license, not the development agreement, whoever gets the gaming license from the Gaming Commission will be required by law to refund the Department of Hawaiian Homelands that $5 million by the first day of operations. So the department will not lose any money, and in return will keep the regulatory aspect through the commission going. Now, where does the money come from? All wagers that are lost to a gaming facility are called gross gaming revenue. And the industry standard for taxation is between 25 and 50% is how most states tax their gaming operations. We are proposing 45% of all revenue be taxed. Of that 45%, 75, so the vast majority, will come to the Hawaiian Home Operating Fund. And that'll be for the use for home development and land acquisition. The next 5% will go to the Native Hawaiian Rehabilitation Fund. 15% will go to the State General Fund, and 5% will go to the newly created State Gaming Fund. So the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, through our proposal, will receive the lion's share of all taxation money, specifically for building more homes, putting the 28,000 on our lands, and acquiring more land to make that a real possibility. So what purpose does the State Gaming Fund have, that additional 5%? We wrote into the law a number of things. First is a compulsive gamblers program and addressing public safety. And that's important because, as we'll talk a little bit about perceived social impacts, if states and countries that introduced gaming that set aside funds specifically for these purposes were more successful in mitigating the impacts of crime and addiction. The State Gaming Fund will also have funds set aside for Native Hawaiian job training at the integrated resort, so the department won't be the only party responsible for making sure that that's negotiated. The state will have the responsibility to put money towards the job training programs. For roads and infrastructure, so no matter where the casino goes, on whatever commercial lands it would be approved for, we understand that there will be traffic impacts. And so the state's portion will cover improvements to roads and infrastructure. And then lastly, all future administrative costs for the Hawaii Gaming Commission will come out of gaming revenue. So for decades now, we've heard that there are severe harms that come with gaming. And the first Indian tribes who legalized it in 1988, they've had about 30 years to go through their operations. And so a number of studies, I think over 400 third-party, peer-reviewed, published articles in reputable journals have been done in the last 30 years on the impacts of gaming. And so one of the biggest concerns we have is concerns related to crime. And there's a suggestion that bringing an integrated resort will increase crime on Oahu. And that's not to say that the potential for crime doesn't exist, but what the science says is if you put money towards public health and safety, you can actually mitigate it. How well can they mitigate it? In, I believe this was Louisiana, for example, they saw a statistically insignificant increase, meaning almost immeasurable, in violent street felonies, which evened out the longer they went from the time that they introduced the casino. They saw decreases in vehicular crime, and they saw that burglary and drug crime also experienced a statistically insignificant decrease. And that study was done in 1997. The rest of the data, I'll provide the sources on another slide. We also have links to all of those sources on our website, so you can review them for yourself. But what we know is generally there is a lack of evidence. Scientists are in agreement that there is a lack of evidence to support the idea that casinos and crime rates are related overall. In fact, gamblers other than casino gamblers, so what they call black market gamblers, people who go to gambling houses, mahjong parlors, card rooms, which already exist in our state, are more likely to commit crimes than those who are routed to casinos. The second primary concern that I think folks share is that an integrated resort will create addiction, and then addiction leads to poverty. Again, these studies show that currently in every state in the country, including in Hawaii, problem gambling or gambling addiction already exists. In Hawaii, that rate is 2.2%, which is higher than the national average of 1 to 2%. That has a lot to do with the fact that not only do we not regulate any of the gaming that's currently occurring in our state, we put no resources to supporting people who have gambling addiction here. There are no programs for them and no dedicated state funds. There is a concern that Hawaii residents and Native Hawaiians will develop gaming problems at alarming rates. Actually, it's called the adaptive model theory or the adaption theory, but it basically shows that over time, problem gambling prevalence or addictive gambling rates stabilize again at that average of 1 to 2% of the population, meaning there is no long-term spike. And lastly, there is a belief that integrated resorts and casinos are the cause of problem gambling. And these 400 articles, 30 years of study in communities that have all fought for the right to make their own money and support themselves, there is no link. There's no agreed upon link between disordered gambling, problem gambling rates, and expanding gambling in those jurisdictions. These are the 6 primary sources that we think would be most helpful. I direct everyone to the second one, Philander, Abarbanel, Bernard, and Cho, which is up-to-date science, particularly with the recent passing in Japan. But please feel free to read all of them and see that, what we previously believed without a discussion in science and data may not be true. And what the data actually suggests is that if you focus on how to responsibly do it, you can mitigate the harms. If you put the money towards it, it's possible to minimize those impacts. One of the final things we want to address is there has been discussion going around that because Indian tribes have special protections, if we legalize gaming in Hawaii, Indians will be able to come to Hawaii and freely expand wherever they want. And that is not true. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, which Indian tribes are governed by, not us, under Section 20, it basically says that the tribe needs to have some form of a historical connection to the land off their reservation that they want to game on. There are no Indian tribes with historical ties to Hawaii, but most importantly, the governor of the state would have to agree before the Department of the Interior allowed it. And I don't think that there is a governor who would allow Indians to come into the Indian tribes to come into our community and expand at our expense. So that's not true. I just want to end. I'll come back to that. Maybe I can. I want to end on. Well, okay. So this is the remainder of our legislative package. Lehua is going to speak in a little bit about this, but these are the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12 bills that were sent to the governor. The governor hasn't released this package yet. We don't know what he's going to include. We do know, however, that if the governor chooses not to include gaming in his package, there are senators and representatives on both sides that are very interested in supporting the casino bill. And then lastly, this was information that was requested by our legislators, but I think it's important to highlight. We were asked, of all of the projects in our $145 million ask, which of those projects would be ready, shovel ready by June 30th, 2023, which is the end of the biennium in 2 years. We picked the top 10. Just those top 10 projects are for 703 units. That's barely a dent in 28,000. And those 703 units would cost us an approximate $65 million, which is 3 times our current CIP budget. And so before I turn it over to Lehua to talk briefly about our the legislative process, I just want to say that, you know, there are no other ideas out there currently. Nobody is talking about the promise that was made to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, the promise that was made to our Native Hawaiian people, and how the state has continually been unable to meet that burden. We've gone to the courts. The courts have agreed that we're underfunded. We've amended the Constitution to try and force the legislature to fund us better. And yet, here we are 100 years into this legacy, and we only have 10,000 lots to show for it. And nearly twice as many, 3 times as many, waiting for a chance. And if no one is going to put an idea forward with where do we come up with billions of dollars, if no one is going to do that, then it is up to us as Kanaka to think about how to get that done. I appreciate that not everyone is going to agree with this idea, but I do want to extend my deepest mahalo for your patience and listening to me this evening. What I hope from this, if anything, is an opportunity to discuss how do we as Hawaiians exert our inherent authority to demand that the promises that were made to our people are met, and how do we really achieve that level of self-sufficiency. So mahalo again for your time. Lehua, I don't know if you want me to throw that slide with the current proposals back up, or if you just want to talk about the legislative process without it.
Yeah, if you could just put that one slide back up. Mahalo. Okay. So again, thank you so much, Deputy. And we just wanted to just touch on very, very briefly that there are other legislative proposals that the department did forward along for consideration. Independent legal counsel has been an issue that the department has attempted to get through the legislature. You're talking probably about 30 years now. So, you know, this becomes a very critical issue, ensuring that the interests of beneficiaries, because oftentimes there are situations where our beneficiaries' interests may be at odds with the state and the AG representation. So that has been, and we haven't been successful in getting that into the governor's package. And so we rely on other legislators to introduce legislation such as that. We have some bills to allow for representation of the chairman or his designee on the Commission on Water Resource Management, as well as the Board of Agriculture. I think I've heard from several of you who are even on this evening talk about the importance of agriculture as another way to diversify our economy. And so those would be opportunities for the department to expand the resources that are available for beneficiaries by looking at what the Department of Ag or even the Department of Land and Natural Resources, which is where the Commission on Water Resource Management sits. So those become very important factors in terms of future development. We're also looking at ways to save money. If you can't generate it, then what are some ways we can save money? So exempting the department from school impact fees when we're developing housing. As many of you know, in our communities, we have schools oftentimes in our communities, and therefore we shouldn't have to pay school impact fees on top of those costs or lands that are used for schools in our communities. Exemption from general excise tax for development of houses. That's a significant cost savings if we can get that. And again, that's more money that can be used towards developing more homes. We have some bills on water rights, and I would really encourage you. There is a separate legislative process that the law school is providing specifically on water issues. I think it's a great opportunity to sort of plug in and see what these issues are. They may not impact many of you here on Oahu, but these are critical issues on some of the neighbor islands in terms of making sure that there are sufficient water for our beneficiaries, and there is revenue that comes from water licenses as well. Infrastructure, I know this is a huge issue for many of our homesteads, and I know many of you feel strongly about infrastructure maintenance and that this is still a responsibility. The department spends minimally anywhere from $5 million a year just to do, that's just maintenance, like checking that the lights are working in your homestead, and that whatever issues that, and I know many of you already know what these issues are for your homestead. So that's a cost that the department continues to pay, and that really should be a responsibility for the different counties. So that's going to be an important measure as well. We have historic preservation. Oftentimes we struggle in terms of getting the required historic review done because DLNR, the State Historic Preservation Division, is often overwhelmed, just like the Department of Hawaiian Homelands can be. And so being able to see how we can expedite that by having that done through the Department of Hawaiian Homelands instead of relying on the State Historic Preservation Division. And then there's some, we've heard from several of you about, and I know some of you on the call on this meeting this evening had issues in your homesteads about game rooms and illegal activities going on. You folks even have neighborhood security watch type. You know, many of you participate in that. And so these two bills are trying to expedite that process to make that process quicker where it's criminal activity involved, and it would allow for it to be done remotely, which could help because oftentimes for neighbor islands, the commission only goes to an island sometimes once a year. And so contested case hearings are only held when it's on island. And then the last one, of course, is limited casino gaming. I just want to touch on briefly that obviously this will be a different legislative session because of COVID. And so this is actually a great opportunity for all of you to engage now. I think there's going to be more opportunities to engage remotely. And so on the legislative website, I can put that link in the chat box. That's a great opportunity to sign on, to log on, to sign up to receive notices. That's how you can testify. The calendar is on there. Again, I would highly encourage you to participate in the training that the law school will be doing, and they will go through some of those resources that are available. So with that, I will turn it back over to the deputy or anyone else.
Mahalo, Lihua. I just wanted to add something. Let me just stop sharing this. I apologize. So the big question is, how much money are we talking about? And I totally skimmed over that. So as we showed you, the range can be as high as the billions. I don't think we can do billions here in Hawaii. I don't think we want that many visitors coming here. So when we talked to our experts, the lowest number that they came up with, 30 million in tax revenue annually. However, there is agreement amongst the experts we have spoken about that 30 million is a gross underestimate. We're just all very cautious in over-promising and under-delivering. So I think if we can convince everyone that another 30 million, which is another CIP budget, that's twice as much work as we could do every year. Even if our legacy for the next 100 years is to cut the waitlist time in half by doubling the amount of projects we could do, you know, that's a big, big step forward. We are working to get more informed opinions now that we have a little bit more time to try and get closer approximations of range. So, you know, the low end and the high end. So everyone has an idea what we're talking about. So I apologize for not mentioning that in the discussion, but that concludes what we intended to present on the bill. And I think we're going to turn it back over to Andrew, who will lead us into the next portion of the meeting.
Sorry, technical difficulties. But thank you, Tyler and Wehua, for presenting the information. So now we'd like to open it up for questions and comments. I do want to call on Sam and Chantel because they had their hand up since I I think, the beginning of the presentation. So they're virtual hand ups. I just wanted to call on them first. So Sam and Chantel, you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Hi, aloha. Actually, my hand was up, trying to help friends get in, or our neighbors that were having trouble. I was trying to get questions on that. But while I'm here, my concerns are that, the negative social impacts, basically what's being presented here and from other professionals that I've talked to that have worked in casinos on the mainland is the same thing, is that you have to have like perfect execution of development, management, everything from the beginning to the end to run it sustainably, and to mitigate these social ills. Not that they don't occur, but to mitigate them and to make a profitable and sustainable whatever program. I can't think of any examples where the state of Hawaii has perfectly executed any programs, especially that are for Native Hawaiians. So I'm not buying it.
Thank you for the comment. So you want to see more information or more details about what that program would look like in the future?
No, I'm saying I don't believe that the state of Hawaii would be able to execute it in the perfect manner that they would need to in order to mitigate all these social ills and to have a profitable program. I don't believe it. Look at rail.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Cedric, if we can go to the chat and kind of call out some of the questions that people have typed into the chat.
Yeah, no problem. I think one of the first ones I think that came in was with regard to stopping at Ko'olina. So I think if we could speak to how we're planning to what the new bill may look like as far as stopping at Ko'olina. I don't know if Deputy, if you could pick that one up.
Yeah. So the existing commercial lands in Ko'olina off limits, not for consideration. And the if we were to acquire land, it would exclude lands west of Ko'olina if they were acquired as well. So it basically makes the area off limits, and that was really to protect that one parcel that is right in the middle of a homestead. I mean, houses surrounding it. Yeah.
Thank you. These are kind of in conjunction together. It's just you answered in the presentation, but it did appear in the chat, which is what percentage of the gaming revenue does the state get? And there was also a question of why does any of the money go into the general funds? So maybe if you could kind of go through that again for us.
Sure. So like I mentioned, 45% of the revenue would be taxed. In total, 80% to the department, 20% to the state, which is sometimes a hard discussion because people think of the department as the state. But the reason we allocated money to the state general fund is the department cannot be responsible for paying for the gambling addiction programs, cannot be responsible for monitoring that, cannot be responsible for public health and safety because we have too many other responsibilities. So putting the responsibility on the state is one reason. Second, we need the legislature's approval to move this forward. I don't believe, and I think anyone who's been through the legislature with us at any point, that the state would allow any form of a bill to go through without a portion being given to the state. So I'm not saying we gave them the lowest number possible, but I think we really wanted to demonstrate that by giving the majority of the funding to DHHL, we're prioritizing what that money is for.
Thank you, Deputy. There are only 3 commercial properties in Kapolei designated for commercial use in DHHL's Oahu Island plan. Is the casino slated for one of these parcels, or is DHHL intending to redesignate lands in Kapolei for commercial use to accommodate the casino?
If the bill goes to the legislature the way we've heard it, Oahu-wide, that obviously opens up.
Deputy, you went on mute. Sorry.
You could be young and still be bad at technology. So there's that. You know, in the original, what was approved by the commission, if it had been limited to Kapolei, yeah, there are only 3 properties, but it didn't stop the department from acquiring additional commercial land in Kapolei. The department has not picked a property. It has not promised anyone anything. So there's no emphasis or preference to any of those 3. But now that we know that the legislature is open to considering it being on Oahu, obviously that changes the realm of possibilities about where land could be acquired. And then as far as redesignating land, it's not something that was at the forefront of our minds, but just remember that any redesignation requires beneficiary consultation, so that would not be possible without coming back to the community to make that request.
Thank you. In 2016, Kamakana-Ali'i Shopping Center was deemed the economic engine, which would generate funding to support construction of new homes. Is the department's financial projections being met for the last 4 years? Debbie, I'll let you answer that, but I do want to chime in that currently Kamakana-Ali'i is paying DHHL about $5 million. But the second half of the question was, do we feel that the financial projections for DHHL are being met for the last 4 years?
For the last 4 years, I actually, Chair, if you're on, I think you have a better understanding of what Kamakana-Ali'i's done, but I would just remind folks that, you know, for the footprint that Kamakana-Ali'i is, we would need 5, 6, maybe 10 more Kamakana-Ali'is to achieve what one casino could achieve, just for perspective. But I think, Chair, did you want to weigh in on the impact that Kamakana has in terms of what we've been able to develop with that funding?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. The projections for Kamakana-Ali'i were actually on the money until such time that the COVID economic downturn occurred. At the same time, all of our revenue-generating properties suffered from COVID. So our revenue off of available land has been cut, I would say, by at least 50%, more likely 40%. The 2 years prior to this budget, we were moving revenue off of available lands into lot development for the first time. And of course, it was the Nelson decision that allowed for us to do that, because prior to the department receiving general funds, all of our employees were special funds and funded from the revenue off of available lands. So I hope that answers the question. They were on projection until such time that this COVID pandemic hit us. And as you pointed out, Deputy, it would take at least 5 shopping centers at that rate of return to equal what we're getting right now via the legislature. So thank you for letting me jump in.
Thank you, Chair. And this question may be a little bit premature, but I think we should address it. It's, what is the proposed timeline for the project?
So so our legislative session begins on January 20th, which is next week, Wednesday. Bill introduction cutoff is the following Wednesday, so the bill will need to be introduced then. Assuming the bill makes it through the Senate or the House, whichever is first, crosses over, it's got to go back through the opposite body and then come back. The legislative session is set to end by April 29th. So let's assume that it makes it through the legislature. The bill gives the governor a year to make his appointments for the Hawaii Gaming Commission. And from there, it's really up to the Gaming Commission to set out the regulatory framework for how long they want to solicit applications, from whom they're going to solicit applications, what the application period is, what the review period is, what the contesting period is. So everything that we sort of see with procurement, for example, that's something that the Hawaii Gaming Commission is going to have to build out first. Like Auntie Chantal mentioned, it's got to be, the regulatory body is critical in terms of doing it perfectly. And so it's going to be it's going to be in the hands of the Gaming Commission to build that whole timeline framework process out. We think that 4 years is probably on the long end before we see opening day. But again, that's part of the reason why we advocated for a separation of the gaming commission and the department, right? To at Chantel's point, the department is already overburdened with what we've got to complete. It's going to take one body completely dedicated to doing this one job. And since we would be the beneficiary of receiving that tax revenue, we've also got to keep separation there to keep it clean. So it's not meant to divert our attention, but really there should be one party responsible for overseeing all of this.
Thank you, Deputy. Here's a question about what about other businesses or that we could lease lands to, such as for solar photovoltaic?
I believe there are already existing solar considerations, not just in Kapolei, but across the state. The revenue generation, unfortunately, is not at a minimum of 30 million a year. So we could contemplate those, but consider that for every solar farm, you know, that's available land in the commercial inventory that would be removed. And I mean, multiple solar farms versus a single casino, that's a consideration that we thought didn't make the most sense.
Thank you, Deputy. Who would be our target audience for the casino project? Would it be for tourists? Question mark.
You know, we've been very clear. The intent is not to put the burden on Hawaii residents, which is why we're not advocating for a lottery. Lotteries are dependent on residents paying for that windfall, and that doesn't make any sense. You know, we have a very hardened infrastructure for tourism, COVID aside. So I do believe that the interest is in the target audience being tourists. Being in the middle of the Pacific doesn't hurt. There is an extensive audience for gaming on the international market, and we just happen to be close to that market as well.
If the proposed casino proposal does not pass, what are some other ideas or proposals that are on the table for generating revenue for DHHL and beneficiaries?
You know, the renewable energy is something that we're going to continue to pursue, beneficiary consultation aside. But in addition, you know, if we can save money, like Lehua mentioned, if you folks didn't tune into the last meeting, the commission approved a pilot project to allocate funds to assist beneficiaries with down payment assistance in the fee simple market. So if it costs less to provide somebody a $75,000 down payment assistance versus $150,000 for new lot infrastructure, that's one way the department can save money and get folks off of the wait list. So it's going to be a balance of continually thinking about revenue generation and cost saving measures in terms of lot generation.
You spoke to this a little earlier, but this question is coming in a little different way. The question is, how many total acres are projected for the building of the casino?
That's going to be entirely up to beneficiaries and the commission. That's something that the commission and the beneficiaries have to decide. The parcels in Kapolei, I think, are no bigger than 15 acres, but that doesn't stop the department from acquiring something much larger if that's what made the most sense. But again, that's going to come down to the beneficiaries through consultation and the commission affirming something like that.
Thank you. The 2010 Kapolei Regional Plan is currently being updated by DHHL. The purpose of the regional plan is to articulate a 10-year vision of Kapolei. A use like casino, if approved, should be included in the Kapolei Regional Plan. Would DHHL consider a more robust regional plan update effort for Kapolei that allows Kapolei more opportunities to discuss the use?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I'll take that one. So actually, we did have a couple questions related to the regional planning process later on in the meeting. We want to get your mana'o about how this proposal could or should fit within the update process for the Kapolei Regional Plan. So that's a very good question, and we wanted your feedback back on process.
Thank you, Andrew. Will the proposed casino also have an online portion where people can game online or a weekly lottery?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute again. No to both. The bill prohibits online gaming. and does not contemplate a lottery for the reasons I mentioned about putting the burden on our residents to fund it.
Deputy, you've highlighted the economic and crime impact on states with casinos. Do we have any information about an impact on Native Americans who live in those areas? Have they directly benefited from a casino on their lands? Do we know how much of the monies generated from the casinos actually went back to them? I'm not sure if we have that information.
I don't have it to that detail, but what we do know is from an expert whose entire doctorate is in the study of these impacts, the study of impacts on these communities. Many of them benefit where they make the upfront investment in making sure that the regulation, the gaming commission is all set up, that the funding is set aside beforehand. They do see those benefits. But in addition to those communities benefiting from the tax revenue, what often gets overlooked is casinos make significant investment into local and community infrastructure simply because it's in their interest to have a healthy community around them. So many Indian tribes, you will see massive donations by casinos to their local hospitals, to their local schools, to their local utilities. And as a department who is responsible for 3 water systems, it would be immensely helpful to know that we had a casino, for example, willing to fund improvements to bring water to Molokai. I'm not promising that, but these are all very real things that casinos do in Indian communities.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions here. Was there a plan of replicating an already existing casino? The answer is no on that one. And then just another reiteration that there will not be any online gaming. So no online gaming is proposed in the draft legislation. One question that has come in that's new is, did you say that the land lease would be for 4 years? So it could be a trial run to see if it brings in the projected revenue. And if not, then look at other casino options?
No, I said 40 years. And there was a concern from a commissioner that financing would be limited, which we see in a number of our land dispositions for anything shorter than 40 years. So we proposed a 40-year, or the legislature is contemplating a 40-year license. The commission approved a 20-year license. And then I saw someone in the comments mention the Pachanga Casino, which is in California. I wish they hadn't taken the video down, but they had an amazing video that was truly inspirational. They were a community that had no running water, and they were incredibly poor. And that casino in particular is well known for how incredible where they're at 20 years in. I mean, they were using buckets, barefoot, outdoor in the dirt with floorless homes, and the casino changed the entire tribe's lives. And I don't want to say that that's what's in the cards. Oh, that's a terrible metaphor. What's in the stars for, the department. But Pachanga is an amazing example of what they've done for their community.
Thank you. It seems there is a huge chunk of revenue that will go towards land acquisition, and many applicants / waitlist stand to benefit from the casino bill. What will current lessees stand to benefit?
Could you repeat the first part, Zed?
Sure. It just seems like a huge chunk of revenue is going towards land acquisition, and many applicants and it's really directed for the applicants and those on the wait list to benefit from the casino bill. What will the current lessees stand to benefit?
Sure. There are so many costs that the department bears over the years in terms of upkeep of infrastructure, trying to figure out how to transition, like Kapolei, where we're still in phase 1 of a 4-phase multi-million-dollar sewer overhaul. The potential to use, if we were able to acquire the land we need and build the homes, to be able to use that money in addition to support our existing homesteads, to make them safer, to improve them. Those are all real benefits that our lessees will see. In addition, what is seen repeatedly in areas that introduce casino, not only there's just a massive boom in economic benefit to the everyday taxpayer. And so, lessees will see benefits in a number of ways. But like I said, we did focus a bunch of the the presentation on how do we get 28,000 off, but that doesn't mean we're not thinking about how to continually maintain our commitment to all beneficiaries in rehabilitating the Native Hawaiians as Kuhio envisioned.
Does the bill call for any of the jobs to give preference to Native Hawaiians?
The bill doesn't call for a job preference. However, the department can negotiate, or excuse me, the commission can negotiate under the development agreement, which is separate from what this bill does, right? This bill is just the gaming commission and the gaming license. On the development agreement end, the commission and the department can negotiate with the developer for preference.
Thank you. There are a couple questions that have come in, kind of circling back to safety. Could you speak a little bit on the plan to set aside dollars for safety mitigation and crime reduction and things like that? Could you just kind of go through that again?
Sure, I believe that's coming out of the state gaming fund. So 5% of it will be set aside. I think in early talks, 1% was deemed sufficient for public health and safety investment. One of the things we want to know is that, you know, this money is going towards increased support for law enforcement to make sure that Kapolei is given the appropriate amount of enforcement that it needs. And I don't know if that's through partnership with the city to talk about opening a substation, but there are casinos that have absolutely invested in new substations in their area to make sure that we address the public health and safety needs. So these are all possibilities and definitely things that can be raised with the legislature if beneficiaries want to see more specific call-outs for how that money is used.
Will DHHL expand their administrative offices on Oahu to support the growing community and this project?
You know, we're already in the middle of COVID, we're in a hiring freeze, but not just that, the state has limited our ability to fill positions even when COVID wasn't happening. I think to expand administrative offices would require the state to support us in getting more staff on board and maybe alleviating the need for funding for development. Well, not alleviating because they still have that responsibility. But I think if we can exhibit a bit more autonomy in the way we raise our money to do the job we need, maybe there is a talking point to be made about how do we get more staff on board. So I mean, that's a bigger conversation with the state in general.
Okay. Andrew, you might have to jump in on this one. I'm not sure. But have there been any discussions about how much of our land that we use to generate revenue is being used for let me see if I can read this correctly. Has there been any discussion of how much revenue land being used for agriculture can make? And is it anywhere near what is needed? Or have those revenue numbers not been discussed? So I think what this question is asking us is, can agriculture equate to the revenues that some of these other, this proposal could generate?
That's a very good question. The answer is no. We haven't done a revenue projection on what we could generate on agricultural lands, primarily because our agricultural focus is to provide agricultural homesteads to beneficiaries. So the department isn't looking to lease out its best agricultural lands for agricultural uses. We want to give our best agricultural lands to our Waitlist beneficiaries so that they can use it, so that they can cultivate it and make use of it. Should they decide to sell their produce and go commercial ag, that's for them to keep. As you folks all know, that the department only collects $1 a year from those types of leases. So our focus for agriculture isn't to generate revenue, rather it's to grow more Native Hawaiian farmers on Hawaiian homelands.
Thank you, Andrew. That's most of the questions. There are some comments in the chat that we will memorialize and keep, but those are the questions that exist in the chat right now, Andrew. I think you're on mute.
We did start the question and answer around 7:45. I think I saw one hand from Kamu K. Kamu, if you wanted to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so right now. Oh, sorry, Kama K.
Yeah, Kama. Are you all? I'm actually a homesteader also. Just checking on some numbers. I understand that Sam and Sherry had a good point on how I think a lot of us VCs or Kanaka in general, is in lieu on how you guys gonna set up this casino and how the money, I guess, so to speak, is gonna filter back. For example, I don't know if the chairman or deputy could answer this. What is the rent for Interjects, the solar panel behind Kalailoa? I think it was 179 acres.
I know that one.
Okay.
The general lease agreement is roughly $200,000 per year, and then there's a percentage payout on the power purchase agreement to the department as well.
Okay, so I did some of my numbers. Just for example, they I don't want to get into the watts and megawatts that they're pushing, but they're clearing almost 600K a month. That company alone, I like how Sam and Sherry was saying. In my mind, I think is why Hawaiian Homes never shoot for that first and capture all of that. They're selling back to HECO their power, which could have been a good. It's not 30 million, but clearing 600,000 a month would be perfect for Hawaiian Homes, I believe. But I think a lot of there's a lot of Hawaiians right now that don't want the casino. There's a lot of us that they exceed numbers because, of course, we want you guys to build. Whatever happened in the past is in the past, but to move forward and seeing that how the deputy had the point of having a governor run everything, run the commission. I think it had that on top of the chart. Deputy, can you hear me?
Yep, that's
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so is that correct?
The governor would appoint, and the Senate would have to go through the advise and consent process. So
Okay.
it would be subject to public testimony, just like how the chairman and myself went through.
Okay, for example, I think Sam and Sherry was putting that out of how, for me, the same thing. Do I want it? Yes. Is it feasible? Does the money come back to us Hawaiians? Does it come back to the department more than going out to other people? I think that's the biggest point. And when I see, for example, that Interjects, that you guys gave them the land behind over there, the Canadian company, it kind of scares me, and what to say that if this does pass and we go head forward to this and we get to there and the casino is built and the money is coming out and in the end we're eating peanuts. How can the Department of Hawaiian Homeland make sure that doesn't happen to us like how it happened inside this deal?
Yeah.
A Canadian company on Hawaiian homelands making revenue for them. To me, that's wrong.
That's a good question, and there's kind of two answers. One is it's going to depend on beneficiaries like you talking to your legislators saying the tax revenue needs to be as high as it is, right? We don't want you to lower it. But let's say they do lower it. At the end of the day, only the commission can agree to the development agreement, right? And so if for some reason the legislature decides there at the last minute they're going to change the bill, 1% of the revenue to DHHL, 99 to the state, the commission doesn't need to give out a development agreement. We just walk away from the deal. I'm not saying that's the kind of politics that needs to be played, but the commission still has a lot of authority in deciding who uses their land and when. And if the commission says no, then nobody makes a penny off of it, and it was all for nothing. So there are checks and balances in place to prevent the legislature from, let's say, gutting the bill and benefiting only the state. We can fight for that not to happen, and even if it did, the commission is not going to let that happen to our beneficiaries.
Okay, because I hope not, because when I look at the numbers with the Interjects, with that company from Canada, something is not right. You know what I mean? And this being $30 million a year is on a whole nother level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that 600,000 they're generating a month and the power purchase agreement. Said, what is our cut off of that?
Yes.
I think it's 1.5 points, but I have to check. I don't know, to be honest.
So we make money both
I know
off
that
of
it's
the
in
land.
addition to our general lease.
Yeah. So we make both money from the rent, comma, and
Yeah.
then we make money as a cut off of whatever they're selling back to HECO.
Okay. Because I'm just saying, you know, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, I know we had the Nahasda money that comes in, you know, every fiscal year and everything. I mean, if just for example, say Hawaiian Homes and own that solar panel down there, shoot, that's 100% coming back to us. You know what I mean? Coming back to the department. You know what I mean? That is something I wanted to point out, and I hope the commission and I hope it does work and it does come back to us. You know exactly what you just pointing out, because it will benefit all of us, I believe. You know, and I hope you guys best of luck for that, and I just hope that it does it for that we the leases and the Kanakas fall flat on their face again. You know what I mean? I think that's why a lot of people are just scared about that.
One other thing, comma, is I think I forgot to mention it, but we wrote the bill so that one Hawaiian Homes commissioner will be on the gaming commission. So the governor would have to pick someone already on the commission. But even then, if you support the bill, but only if it's not the governor appointing it and there's something else, use your voice, go to your legislator. I think that's an okay thing to do. So if you want it another way, you know, once it's out of our hands, the legislature, they're going to do whatever. So I would suggest talking to your legislator about whatever other model you think could work.
And that's the only thing I think a lot of people are scared of. You know, if somebody else control it, and you know, a lot of money goes away instead of coming back. You know.
Yeah.
But good luck, then. Let's do it.
Mahalo.
Thank you for your comment. So I think we have a couple more questions in the chat, and then I wanted to transition to we need to ask you folks some questions to get your feedback on some specific questions. So please stick around. We know it's been a long day, but please stick around because we need feedback on questions we have for you. So Cedric, if you want to ask kind of the last couple questions that appeared in the chat box.
Sure. Just kind of circling back, there was a question about how we're going to generate revenue for leasing it for $1 a year. And I just wanted to kind of circle back to that, you know, as beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, the beneficiaries can lease land for $1 a year for 99 years plus another 100, whether that's a residential or agricultural lease. Our general lease properties are negotiated and they go out to beneficiary consultation, and we negotiate a highest and best use rate for land dispositions, and that's when we do go out for beneficiary consultation and we talk about what the potential revenue could be on those general lease properties. So it isn't $1 a year on the revenue generating properties for the department. So here's a question: will an extensive CIA be taken and strongly considered on the proposed land? There are a lot of historical sites in Kapolei, and Andrew, maybe you can just sort of speak to our process.
The Department of Hawaiian Homelands is considered state lands, and because it's considered state lands, it is required to go through HRS Chapter 343 compliance, which typically involves either the processing of an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. Both of those documents require an extensive assessment of cultural impacts and an assessment of potential archaeological and cultural sites that may exist in a proposed area. We do these studies when we develop homesteading. We require it of our general lessees when they do their development.
Thank you, Andrew. You know, we went up to 8:20 already, so I'm going to give it back to you, Andrew, to take us through the rest of the proposal or presentation. Sorry.
Okay. So if you can just I just wanted to ask you folks a couple questions about process. And Cedric, if you can bring up the slides. So we need, So if we need your feedback on process, and as you folks know, good process generally makes for good outcomes. 1 second. So I'll just read the question out loud. So the first question is, for those of you who are still undecided about gaming, what additional information would you like to have presented at future beneficiary meetings regarding gaming? So for instance, we heard some answers about examples of Indian casinos, how the money could be used. What are some additional information that we could provide at future meetings? So you could type your answer in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can input in that manner. And I think I'll take about, if everyone's typing in the chat box, I'll maybe take 3 minutes for people to type in their mana'o in the chat. So looking at all the responses coming in, and these are good responses. So we'll try to get more information related to these types of information that you folks are identifying for us. Oh, that's a good comment. Getting real life accounts of how casinos run in Native American areas. So maybe we'll answer this question for another minute, and then we'll go to the next question. Okay, I'm gonna transition to the next question. So for those of you who still want to type in your mana'o, please feel free to do so. But so the next question is related to the regional plan, and I know there was a question earlier about how this proposal can be integrated with the Kapolei regional plan process. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Kapolei regional plan, it was adopted by the Commission in November of 2010. The department recently initiated an update of the regional plan. So hopefully all of you folks have gotten mail, postcard, flyers about that update process. Next slide. So the first meeting for the update process of the regional plan was held in December of 2020, so about a month ago. So I see many familiar faces that participated in that first meeting. And then we were planning to have the second meeting in early 2021, probably around February, and come up with a draft plan shortly thereafter and present that to the commission in the first part of this year, and then come back out for consultation on the draft plan later on in the spring. But with this proposal that recently came up and was developed, What I wanted to know and what we wanted to know was, next slide. Should the department address this gaming initiative as part of the regional plan update process with Kapolei beneficiaries? Or should the department have separate meetings with Kapolei beneficiaries apart from the regional plan process regarding gaming? So as you input your yes or your mana'o, please also let me know why we should choose either path.
I just, Andrew, if I could just add in,
Mhm.
if the legislature does introduce a version of the bill that opens it up to Oahu, can the beneficiaries still consider this as a part of the Kapolei planning process?
They could. So yeah, as part of the regional planning process, for those of you who haven't participated in it prior, what it does is it identifies issues and opportunities that are priorities for that particular region that the department and its beneficiaries should address. So it'll identify champions for those priority projects and action steps for implementation. So if one of the priorities for the region, if there is consideration for gaming by beneficiaries in the region, it could potentially be a priority project in the regional plan. So I see one comment, both. Um, I see another comment, yes, it should be addressed during the Kapolei Regional Plan update process. If approved, if the bill is approved and cited in Kapolei. And then there's a question about what will be put into this bill that would restrict the governor and legislature from allowing any agency or entity to allow competition of another casino. Tyler or Lehua, can you answer that question?
Um, the strongest limitation anti-home that we could put in was saying one license. Realistically, there's not much more legally we could do to limit it. So it's really going to come down to the will of the legislature and the governor to expand it, which is why if we are able to do this and we are fortunate enough to do it right, we got to do it big enough so that when they realize what the real potential here is, if they do try and, let's say in 10 years, open up a second facility, ours has to be the one to go to so that we don't lose the revenue. But there's no real legal way to prevent the legislature or the governor in the future from opening up another. We just need to make sure that we are the premier one from the get-go. You know what I mean? People are always going to go to a Hilton or a Sheraton, but there is a reason people continue to come back to the Royal Hawaiian, and I think we have to come at it from that mentality of we got to be the Royal Hawaiian of it, so that the day when the day comes, if they choose to expand, there's still a reason to come to ours.
Okay, I think going to give a little bit more time for people to respond to this question. We have 2 more questions and then a quick survey for people to take. Okay, let's go to question number 3. Okay, if your answer was yes, we should discuss gaming during the regional plan update. When should DHHL conduct its next regional plan meeting? Should we wait till after the legislative session is Paul and we know the outcome of the bill? Or should we talk story about this as soon as possible? Okay, so I see a lot of feedback that we should wait till the legislature session is Paul and we know the outcome of the bill. There's one comment that we should do it as soon as possible. I'll maybe take 1 more minute for people to respond, and then we'll move to the last open-ended question. And then we do have a quick survey that we'd hope people can take. Okay, let's move to the last open-ended question. So for those of you who are hesitant about gaming because of the perceived negative impacts it could have on community, what are some other out-of-the-box ideas that may generate significant revenue that the department should consider? We heard a couple already, maybe agriculture. So what are some other out-of-the-box ideas that you think we should take a look at to generate revenue?
I just want to comment on the first one that came through. Aloha Wendy, marijuana dispensary. Oddly enough, we proposed that to the commission. They shot it down immediately. They voted no. I think pretty close to 9, maybe 8 voted it down. So if that's something that you really want to see, I think you should contact your commissioners because that's something that we definitely threw out to them and did not get any traction.
So maybe I'll give maybe about 2 more minutes for people to answer this question, and then we'll move on to the quick survey.
Stephen, to address your question, is it DHHL's kuleana to generate their own revenue? Not according to our constitution, right? This is a huge conversation, because if the legislature is not willing to consider this, I think you are absolutely right to ask the legislature, then what are you doing with your kuleana to fund the department appropriately? So that's a really good question.
Okay, maybe one more minute, and then I'll toss it to Cedric for the survey. So I see another question. What is the statistics of putting a gambling casino in the middle of the largest native Hawaiian community in the world? I guess to clarify, what types of statistics are you referring to? What specifically would you like to measure or have more information about? That would be Sam. Okay, statistics on negative societal impacts. Well, mahalo everyone for giving us feedback on these questions. This is really important and gives us good guidance on how to proceed with respect to the conversation going forward. Cedric, did you want to talk about the survey and how people can input into it?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So I'm putting two things into the chat. I'm putting a dedicated website to this limited gaming proposal. It'll have the deputy's presentation. It'll have copies of both the bill that the commission approved, as well as one that we think the legislature may introduce should the governor not include our proposal in this package, as well as all of the data that Deputy Gomes referred to with regard to the social impacts that the data that we use to inform our decision making on this. And so there's a link there, and then I'm also going to put a link to a brief 6-question survey. It's really short, but it would be really helpful to the department if we could get the people on this call to review the link. So it's a SurveyMonkey link that I just put here into the bottom of the chat. I invite everyone to take the survey. Like I said, just 6 questions. It should take you no more than 2 minutes to get done.
So with that, I think the last thing is we just want to recap next steps. So Lehua or Deputy, if you just kind of give a quick overview of what is to come, I guess, in terms of the legislature. I know we talked about it earlier, but just a quick review so that people can leave with what is coming up after this conversation tonight. Also, I just wanted to remind you folks, we also have statewide beneficiary consultation meetings next week, Monday and Tuesday. You folks are more than welcome to participate in those meetings too. The format will be a little bit different because it is statewide. We'll have a lot more people participating. So it won't be this kind of back and forth type of conversation, but it is a new way to interact. It is COVID, so this is going to be our first attempt, and we want to try to get participation in as much as possible, but understanding that we are limited because of COVID. So, sorry, Deputy or Legal, if you can just give a quick recap of the upcoming dates for the legislative session and how people can participate.
Andrew, before we do that, I saw a question in the chat that I thought it would be good if you
Oh,
could
okay.
address, and it was basically, are the meetings open to people on the wait list as well? I think that's an important question.
Yes, so the meeting notice for tonight's meeting was sent to both Kapolei lessees and applicants that may live in the Kapolei zip code. For the statewide consultation meetings, we sent notices to all beneficiaries, so all waitlist applicants and all lessees. So yes, applicants can participate in these beneficiary consultations, and we encourage them to do so because oftentimes they are underrepresented in some of these important discussions.
And the statewide one too, Andrew?
Yes, the statewide one too. Applicants can participate in the statewide conversation too.
The link to the gaming legislation that I put into the chat will have the information on the dates, times, and how to access the statewide beneficiary consultations.
Lehua, did you want to just quickly highlight the legislative high points for session?
Sure. So as Deputy pointed out, the legislature starts on January 20. And so from that point, there's the week after that is when all bills need to be introduced. And so at that point, once all the bills are introduced, and then we'll have the bill numbers, because right now we're referring them as numbers that were considered by the commission. And so these bills will have Senate bills and House bill numbers. I'll work as closely as I can with Cedric and our ICRO to keep everyone as updated as possible on the different vehicles that the House and Senate will be considering in terms of legislative proposals. At that point, once the bills are all introduced, then the bills get referred to different subject matter committees. And, as Deputy sort of pointed out, if they're Senate bills, the Senate hears them first. And if they're House bills, then the House hears them first. And they go through primarily usually subject matter committees. Most of our bills will likely go to like a Hawaiian Affairs. In the House, it's Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. And in the Senate, it's Hawaiian Affairs. If there are fiscal implications, they may go to the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate or the House Finance Committee. And so that process will go through most of February. And by the beginning of March, the bills have to what is called crossover. So any Senate bills will move over to the House, and any House bills will move over to the Senate. And then that same process that they just went through in February, they go through that process again, but the Senate has the House bills and the House has the Senate bills. And then that continues for most of March. We'll get past Kuhio Day and Easter. And after that, it's called second decking. And that's where all the bills basically return back to the original body. So if there's any bills still alive, Senate bills that went through the House or House bills that went through the Senate, then they go back to the original body. And then at that point, the legislature goes into what is called conference. And conference is where the Senate and the House look at the different versions. They're looking at the Senate's version of the House bill or the House's version of that same bill. And they discuss those differences and see if they can come to an agreed upon bill. And so this session, because of COVID, the legislature sort of condensed it slightly and reduced some of the recess days. So the legislature is scheduled to go through April 29th, as Deputy has said. So basically 4 months of the process. This will be relatively new to most of us because, again, with COVID, there's a lot more going on virtually than has been in the past. I really encourage you, if you want to engage in this process, to submit written testimony, because I'm not sure how the virtual process is going to allow for as much well, not in person, but basically where you can speak. There is a process where you can, but I think it will be limited to some degree because there's different committees going on at the same time. There may be hard cuts, is what I call, is if that time for this committee needs to end at noon, for example, it will end at noon, no matter where the committee is in terms of the process of hearing different measures. So again, your probably best bet will be to put your positions in writing. The legislature, through the website I put in the chat box, you can submit testimony online. It's pretty user friendly, so I would highly encourage that you utilize that as a resource. So again, that would be the best place. I think beneficiary consultation is important for the department to get your feedback, but I also think that ultimately this proposal goes to the legislature, and our elected officials will be the ones looking at these measures, making amendments, not only hearing from beneficiaries, they're going to hear from the public and different perspectives on what may be important. So again, it's, I would encourage all of you to weigh in. And again, not only on this bill, there are a number of other measures, cost-saving measures that could also assist the department greatly. And I know many of you have raised issues with regard to infrastructure maintenance or criminal activity. So these are opportunities to weigh in on those measures as well. So that was pretty much in terms of the timeline, unless you wanted me to touch on anything else.
Andrew, can I just address two things that I saw in the chat before we wrap up?
Sure, no problem.
So one, on our website, we have a box on the bottom of the website called Asset Management. That Asset Management link will take you to all of our general leases, rights of entries, and licenses. I saw a comment in the chat regarding leases to lands and businesses that are not given to Hawaiians should pay fair market value. And we absolutely agree. So our general lease lands, we get highest and best use, and that information is all publicly available in the asset management box on the department's website. I also saw one more comment with regard to lots of federal monies were not used and went back to the feds, which categorically is not true. The Department of Hawaiian Homelands has spent down all of its federal funding. There are some dollars left, but we have plans for that. Plans for those funds to get expended. So we have spent down all of our state and federal money that has been assigned to DHHL. That's all, Andrew.
Okay, I think there was one last question about can we provide comments to you at a later time? The answer is yes, you can always provide us with comments, and then I'll put the email address in the chat that you can respond to. Oh, shucks. Okay. So you can provide us with comments, but in this situation, the other place that we encourage you to direct your comments to is to your legislative representative, because as Lehua had stated, the next step in this gaming bill process is that the bill will be heard by the legislature. She explained in detail the legislative process. So you can submit your comments to Hawaiian Homelands if you have any questions that we can help clarify for you. We will be more than happy to. But in addition, please also remember to direct your questions to your legislative representatives. So I just put in the chat box the planning office's email. So if you have any additional questions, please send it here, and we will forward it on to the persons within the department that will best be able to answer your questions and take your comments. Okay. With that, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for taking the time out of your busy lives to have this meeting with us. We hope it was helpful for you to get a little bit more information. It definitely was helpful for us hearing your input and your feedback about this proposal, why you like it or why you may not like it, and For me in the planning office, it was great getting your mana'o on the process moving forward, and it will help inform our process moving forward with this conversation and with future plans in Kapolei. So with that, I just wanted to mahalo everyone, and please stay safe and have a good evening. Thanks.